Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Formed by Jesus podcast. This is actually the last episode before we enter into season 7 for our Formed by Fasting practice. I'm so excited to not eat food alongside of you. But today we have a very special guest, someone who is newer to the family. I'd like to introduce you to Whitney Clayton.
Good to be here, Trey.
Yeah, thanks.
And everyone else.
Yes. Just so you know, if ever I'm like looking at you, that means the camera's on you. So I'm the switcher, so you have no idea. So you just have to just be ready.
I'm just going to keep looking around aimlessly. How about that?
Do the gym look
Yes.
at the camera? Yes. Okay, so this week was week 4, which is all about doing the work of an evangelist, really focusing on it does take work. Now, we are recording this before the message. So there's no pressure on you talking about how the message went or any insights and thoughts because you haven't heard it yet.
My real goal here is to steal all your thunder.
Nice.
I want to preempt everything.
Nice. Yeah. So, we're just going to dive in. I would love for you guys to get to meet Whitney. Again, little context we shared last Sunday is, I guess we met in 2015 at some point, or did we even meet before you came to our preview gathering?
I don't recall if we were already in our cohort together or not.
I don't think so.
I think
I remember
came.
being so annoyed with the cohort because I had already launched. I'm
Yes.
like, why did we do this?
I blew it already.
Yeah.
Which is what every church planter thinks every day that they wake up.
Right? Yeah, so you came to Passion Creek at the movie theater December 13th, 2015. You sent an encouraging text, hey, praying for you, this was great. And then we started January 10th, 2016. But you had kind of parachuted in at that point, so you were still kind of just getting to know the community.
I think at that point we were meeting in our home with a group of people that we had just, neighbors that we had just met and began talking to Jesus, talking about Jesus with them. And it was slowly forming into Bible study, which eventually became a church and all of those things. But we were coming to visit Passion Creek because we wanted to be encouraged that it will actually happen one day.
Nice.
And it was really encouraging to get to be a part of what God was doing even then. And so exciting to see it done in a movie theater, which was, I always felt like such a great use of that space.
Yeah. And John Pope actually reached out to me because they just launched in a movie theater.
Yes.
And he's like, what are your tips? And I was like, man, get as creative as possible with the kids' wing. So that's something we never really did well. It's amazing to see our setup now is like so extravagant. We do so much. We did so very little at the theater.
No, I remember that.
Yeah, mainly because the chairs were up. Like so many of the stuff already looked nice.
Yeah.
But the kids part, like we had so many families come and go, well, it's weird. Like my kids don't have a classroom. It feels like they're just put in strange places. So
because the chairs are already stuck to the floor.
Right.
And so every space, there's zero mobility.
It is what it is.
Yeah, you have, a 10-foot aisle that's
exactly
45 feet long, and that's all the space that you have.
Very
to put
awkward
kids in.
space.
Yeah.
But we made it church at the movies. We utilized the screen. We did as best we could, but it sounds like John Pope's doing a great job. I looked at some photos from their launch weekend, and I think they got really creative with the space. So I think that's going to be good for them.
That's one of my favorite parts of church planting, seeing how creative the church can be in adapting, and molding into different spaces. I love that. So yeah, I'm going to have to find a way to go see John Pope soon because I want to see what they're doing.
Yeah. So to be clear, church planting just literally means starting a church. So to non-Christians, they're like, are you a gardener? But we use that language.
We cultivate.
Yes.
We cultivate.
Yeah. I think it's biblical language. It's neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but it's God who gives the growth. We see that in the letter to Corinthians in chapter 3. Notice I didn't say it was first or second because I'm not sure. I think it's first.
One of.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where we get the verbiage. So that's where we kind of met. So I would love for you to you have the floor, kind of even share your story as far back as you'd like. I'd love to even hear what led you to the East Valley, all of those things. And I'll randomly pepper him with questions and interrupt you because that's what I do.
That's awesome. That's what I do as well. So this will be fun. Yeah. So church planting, it was a journey for us to even say yes to it. For the longest time, I was working on a church staff. My wife was also on that same church staff. We loved ministry, knew our whole life was going to be spent in ministry. But at that time in my life, I thought I was going to be a behind the scenes discipleship guy and didn't really feel the need to preach. I was just very interested in seeing people grow and develop and be formed into the image of Christ. And so I know that the preaching plays an integral role in that, but I know that you also need the flesh on flesh community,
Right.
where the iron is sharpening iron and knocking off those rough edges. And so that's where I always wanted to be. And so my wife and I said no to church planting for years. We had people tell us, "Hey, you guys ought to come, and you ought to come with North American Mission Board, and we'll help you guys plant." And we kept saying no, partially also because Allie came from a church planting family. Her dad was a lifelong planter a couple of times over. And so she was giving it a hard no.
Which is why I said no for so long too.
Absolutely, yes. I said no for the longest time because I knew a lot of the guys that were out there starting churches, and it takes a very unique individual to be willing to do that. And I saw a lot of guys that were willing to put their family on the back burner in order to accomplish the task. And I just have always felt like my first ministry is to my family, and to do that is to sacrifice someone else. Like Christianity is all about sacrifice, but it's sacrificing yourself, not others.
That's a good word.
And so I just could never bring myself to pull the trigger and put my family in a position where I was going to have to choose to abandon them, leave them to their own, and just check in from time to time. And I met eventually with a mentor, and he brought his mentor, who's his pastor, to lunch with me. And we were talking about starting a college ministry. And I expressed that same idea, that I didn't want to follow the path of church planting because I was afraid of how it would hurt my family. And my mentor's mentor just very graciously, lovingly looked at me, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's because you have no idea what you're talking about."
Nice.
Love a good mentor.
Yeah.
And he just began sharing with me the way that church planting and taking this leap of faith to say to the Lord, "Hey, use me. I'll put myself in the gap between all these people who are far away from you, and be the bridge that helps them come closer to Christ." And so in hearing that, by the end of that lunch, I left. Driving on my way home, I called my wife, Allie, and asked, she asked me, "How was lunch?" I said, "It was great. I think we need to pray about church planting." And she said, "No." And I said, "I agree, but I think we need to pray about church planting." And we began praying. And I think it took about 2 weeks before the Lord had totally flipped our hearts and captured us with this vision of what it would look like to build a church around relational discipleship, and not have it be based on programs that everybody goes to, which eventually devolves into checklists, when checklists are the fastest way to make Pharisees. And I didn't want that. And so what would it
In
look
our
like?
vernacular, not to make attenders, but to make disciples. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so it took that vision, that question, what would it look like to actually form disciples in the shape, into the mold of Jesus? And that's what really drew us to deciding, hey, we'll open ourselves up to this. We'll say yes to the Lord. And I think that one of the big questions that helped us in that moment was saying, like, it'll be scary to step away from a great job. I was, similar to your story, I was the heir apparent at a large church that was doing really well. And yet to step away from that meant that I had to find a salary.
Yeah.
It meant that I had to invite my family into a whole bunch of uncomfortable spaces where we don't know what the future will hold.
Right.
Which is always true. But sometimes you feel that more than others. And so when we began praying and the Lord helped us to get over a lot of those hurdles, we began just asking, okay, so at this time we're in northern Kentucky, I think Cincinnati, Ohio. And we began asking the question, where do we plant? Where do we do this? And our first thought was here in our city, but I was the young guy on staff that was preaching. And so we didn't have a super strong sending mentality. And so it would have been the young people go with Whitney, the old people stay here.
Yeah.
That's a split. That's not starting a new church.
Right.
And so we said, okay, not here in the city. And so then all my mentors told me, hey, go where you have influence. For me, that's the southeastern United States. But there is a lot of gospel capacity present in the southeastern United States. Like if they're doing what Jesus has called them to do, they don't need me to move back.
Right.
And so we said, okay, not the South. Well, then we just pulled up the North American Mission Board. They have a list of 32 send cities where send with a D, where they want to send people and resources in order to strengthen the church. And we just began praying over that list. And I think probably a week or two into that process of both Allie and I praying, I think she asked the question, okay, give me your top 3. And we were in very different places where I'm like, can I give you my top 5? Because I love this process. She's like, can I say Cincinnati?
Nice.
Nonetheless, when we asked that question, began talking, both of us, Phoenix was at the top of our list. And I have no reason to say other than the Lord was guiding us and he was leading us and we were hearing him. And so we began researching. At that time, we thought we were going to plant a collegiate church like on the campus of ASU Tempe.
Yep.
Which at that time, I still remember the stats that there were 62,000 students that were on campus, and there were generous estimates where 3,500 of them were involved in a campus ministry or church.
Wow.
Which that is an unbelievable need for the gospel. And so we flew out here in order to, set foot on campus and just ask the Lord to speak to us. So when we got here, we rented a car, drove straight to ASU, got out, started walking around campus, and about 5 minutes into it, it's just a hard no from the Lord. I know no other way to say it than in my spirit, I just knew we are in the wrong place.
That happened to me and Jordan. We were at a Chipotle in Las Vegas, and there was this idea of maybe we can go help a plant in Las Vegas. And she said it at the very same time I was thinking it. She's like, we would never move here. God, there's no way. And it's like,
wow.
I felt that too. You're just saying out loud what I'm feeling. It's so interesting how the Lord does that. And it's like, he lets you think about it a little bit and even to fly all the way there, but he has to get you here to get you there, right?
Oh, absolutely. So, I say all the time, when people ask me in the short version, how did you get out here? I say it's a long trail of bait and switches from
nice.
God. Just take one more step, Whitney. It'll be cool.
Nice.
And then he moves that. One more step. It's all right. But Allie and I, so it's funny to hear this story told from Allie's perspective because it's exactly what you said. She was actually the one that was super nervous, but then she said she looked at my face and it was just like a sour milk. This is wrong. In my head as the provider, I'm going, we spent $800 to fly here that we don't have.
Yeah.
And so we ended up calling a friend of ours that works in the city for church planting, Monty Patton, and asked him, hey man, we flew out here and this is not where we're supposed to be. What do we do? And that's where he told us, go check out this place, Eastmark, on the east side of the city. And so we hopped in the car. By the time that we're getting on the 60, making our way over, we've pulled up the website on our phone and we fell in love with Eastmark just from the website in that moment. And we felt like the vision that the community developers are casting is so similar to the vision that we feel called by God to instill in our people. And so it was just an immediate love at first sight moment with this community. We drove out there. I remember it was funny as we were coming on the 24 at that point. There's literally like a tumbleweed that goes across, and I'm going, where on earth are we at this point?
I mean, for context, this was a decade ago.
It was.
So there were a lot of tumbleweeds at that point compared to now.
Yeah. It was. So actually, I say it wasn't the 24. It was before the 24 existed. It was when we got off. We were driving down Ellsworth.
Yes.
And that's when the tumbleweed rolled across. Yeah. And so it was an experience. And so from there, it was really just continuing to say yes to the Lord. And I love one of the things that Allie and I, whenever we have a big decision, we're always praying, Lord, let one of the signs that you lead us by be unity between Allie and I. And he's been really gracious where it doesn't always come at the same time, but it does always eventually land where we're feeling more than just this is an option that we could do, but where we land, both of us saying, hey, we need to do this. And that's what we experienced in saying yes to church planting. That's what we experienced in looking at the Send City list, both of us drawn to the same thing in unity, and then both of us standing on the campus of ASU Tempe and feeling the same no in our hearts. And God has been really gracious to us in leading us together. And I that's not everybody's story. But I'm really grateful. That's what we fight for. That's what we pray for.
Yeah.
Is for us to remain unified as we're making these big decisions. And God continued to lead us in that way.
You know, something that blows me away every time. There's several people at our church right now that are like, I don't know how I got here. Like not at the church, but like Queen Creek or Mesa or Chandler Gilbert. And it's just so fun to me because I think about how God has orchestrated my life to lead to the point of starting Passion Creek and all of those ups and downs. And we can talk a lot about endurance. I hope we do so, which was the last week's topic in our series on the fourth quarter, fourth soil, which we are, I noticed, matching shirts subtly.
Is it here? Yeah, there it is. Good job. Attaboy. I should have worn my shoes too.
It's clashes though.
Yeah,
so,
that's true. Yes.
Yeah, you can't do that. But like, I get so excited though. Like, there was somebody in our Thursday group that was like, I don't know why, but like the Lord was leading us to move here. And I just get so excited thinking, like, it's not just the pastors that he's orchestrating to like be a part of this movement that God is doing right now at Passion Creek. It's like other people have those stories too. It's not just the pastors that are like, for some reason, I'm here in this city. You know, it's just so cool to see God moving. And, you know, years ago to orchestrate what we're experiencing now, and who knows what's in the future. But it's always fun to kind of just sit back and realize that. Yeah,
absolutely, because that's what a pastor's dream.
Yeah,
is that his people would be hearing from the Lord and that they would have their own stories of following. And I think it's important. That's an important feature for us as pastors to help people recognize, hey, you didn't just have a random idea. You were actually following the Lord.
Yeah.
Because it's easy for people to think, oh, well, you know, pastors, they're the professionals. They're the ones that hear from God.
Yeah.
And I love calling that out in people and saying, no, you're hearing from the Lord right now.
Yeah. 2 Timothy 1 talking about a holy calling. And I know in context, he is talking to Pastor Tim, but this is written to Timothy, but for the whole church. Yeah. And I think that holy calling, how he called us, he saved us according for his purpose and his grace. That is not just for pastors. That is for everybody in the kingdom. What a just invigorating, what an exciting thing to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So now you launch, okay? You start the thing.
Yes.
All right. Now, tell me some horror stories. No.
Those are easy.
Talk about endurance. You know, like what is part of your story, you know, to help catch people up. Because I'd love to even talk about specifically how God was moving in your heart this last year and some of our conversations, however much we were willing to share and all of that. But yeah, so talk about like, you know, the worst week for me ever? The second Sunday.
Yeah.
So we launched with 144 people.
We showed up to say, hey.
That was the preview gathering, so I'm not counting that.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So the actual launch day, January 10th. Because I think actually the preview gathering was like 200. So because we had like all of Heart Cry of my father's church come. We were like, we're doing a combined service to root for us. So I was like, we got this thing in the bag. We're huge.
We're killing it.
Not computing. Wait, all of these people don't go to my church. So first launch Sunday, 144 friends from around the valley. I'm from here. So like I have like high school buddies. They're like, good for you, man. We'll show up. You seem kind of young, but let's, whatever. The second Sunday we had 44. We dropped 100.
Ooh, yeah, that'll bring you down to earth.
Yes.
Man.
And I remember eating it in and out thinking, what have we just signed up for?
Yeah, man. Oh, and then
it took 7 years.
That question.
It took 7 years to get back to 144.
Wow. Golly, that's a long time.
Which was Easter Sunday, at the school.
Yeah.
We finally hit 150. We went above 140. I was so annoyed with that number.
Oh,
you know,
man.
actually, I think in numerical terms, it's called gross, isn't it? 144.
Oh, it is.
So
yes.
I was like, I kept making that joke. Like,
Yeah.
it's just so gross.
It is gross. The Lord knew what he was doing when he named it that.
Yes.
Yeah. So for us, it's funny. I think that every church plant has sort of its own story and its own, like every good story, there are themes that are turned over and over and recapitulated and seen in different ways. And I think that for us, one of the deepest desires of our heart was to help people learn to live life in community, deep, meaningful relationship with other people. And part of why we were wanting that was because of the community that we were serving in. We always had the idea that your mission field should drive the model of your ministry. If you're just taking a model of ministry you saw somewhere else and trying to plop it down irregardless of the mission field, there's a good chance that you're going to struggle to connect with the people. And so we knew that in our community, there was going to be incredible levels of individualism. You know, 7 out of 10 people in Arizona are not from Arizona. So that means 7 out of 10 of my neighbors are the kind of people who will dig up their own roots and transplant themselves because they don't need any of that. They're good. They can do it on their own. And so I knew that there was going to be a lot of rugged individualism, and it was going to lead people to isolation and brokenness. Being an individual is great until it becomes you're isolated. And
maybe even moving into Eastmark, they like the ideal of community.
Oh, absolutely. That was the vision that our community put forward, was that community is more than a group of buildings. It's a group of relationships. And so we knew that there would be a shared value there, even if it's not something that they're good at.
Practiced, right.
And so relationship from the very beginning is what we were all about. And I feel like that is the place where we experience the deepest level of spiritual warfare from the very start of our church. And I feel like about 3 times in the 10 years that we were a church, there were a few relational breaks that led to larger fallout relationally. And that was undoubtedly, the source of all of our horror stories are the relational attrition, because we mean what we say, that we want to know people and love them, not for who we want them to be, but for who they are in the middle of your brokenness. And we would do our best. Allie and I would do our best, knowing that we're broken and we bring our own set of issues that make us difficult to love to the table. But when those relationships would break and it would begin to fall apart, and then it would slowly seep out to other relationships, creating more insecurity, distrust, all of those things, it was really heartbreaking and really difficult for Allie and I as we went through that season. And it led regularly from us to ask the question, are we really, really bad people? It led us to the place where we were doubting, has God called us to do this thing that we think we're doing if we're so bad at it? But what we kept coming back to was the truth that we were in a spiritual war, and we were putting our finger on one of the issues that Satan loves. If I can just keep these people isolated from one another, they're going to think that they're the problem and that they're the only ones that are experiencing brokenness. They're the only ones that their marriage is struggling, and it's going to keep people more isolated. And there's not going to be room for people to come and to share the gospel and to help people realize that you are broken, but you're still loved. Yeah. And so I think
we mean what we preach.
Yeah. It's crazy. We really, really do. And so
I think what was heartbreaking too for me these past 9 years is finding out too late, like them believing lies, letting it fester.
Yeah.
What is that? A root of bitterness coming up. And then by the time I have a chance to even try to say, whoa, let me show you the facts. Who said that? Oh, it turns out nobody said it. You made it in your head. But the enemy, man, he whispers so many lies. He's so deceitful. And it seems, oftentimes to be too late. It gets to that point in 2 Timothy, the irreconcilable. And that is just the saddest thing.
It is. It's so heartbreaking because you love these people.
Right.
And I think that it's you build this meaningful relationship that's founded on what you think is both of you growing as disciples together, and to find out that there's this root of bitterness that's been festering and growing. It's heartbreaking, and it pulls you apart. I think about a song that was helpful for me at one point when I had a dear friend that the issues continued to grow and grow before we could get to the root, until they felt the need to break and get away. And I understand that. That's human. And
right.
But there's a song by Andrew Peterson that I absolutely love. And a lot of his songs are so wonderful when you're going through those difficult, dark seasons, because he writes songs about sorrow, which is
Have you read his book, Light in the Dark?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely love that. Yeah. My favorite books are the Wingfeather Saga.
Yes.
My goodness. If you have young children, you need to have that set of books to read with your kids.
You need to connect with Jeff, Soccer Camp.
Yes.
That's his favorite.
No way.
All time. He was the one who told me to get it.
That's
for
amazing.
my kids.
Jeff, I'm coming for you.
Yeah. Jeff is the guy who comes up with Soccer Camp, which is March 11th through the 13th. But what is the song?
I want to say I'm sorry. It's probably, like, if you look it up, it's the one that has the least views.
Of course.
But it's because it's hitting on an issue that is that's really personal and humiliating. And I don't mean that embarrassing. I mean that in creating humility. Because the whole point of it is, I don't know how, it's the story of a relationship that broke, and it's saying, I don't know how we got to this place, but I want to say I'm sorry.
Wow.
And I just can't. And then my favorite part is that at the end, he has the statement where he sings, I want to sit next to you at the marriage feast of the Lamb.
Wow.
Man, that breaks me every time I hear it, because one day we will be in a place where these people that we dearly love and yet we can't seem to reconcile with here, we will be reconciled. And we will be able to sit next to one another, enjoy, free from the weight of hurt and offense, and free from the inability to forgive, and in a place where we can see each other the way that God sees us, and we can love one another. And I love that song. So that song was really helpful in those seasons.
Oh man, I got to go listen to it.
It's really good.
But at the same time, what a joy to see that happen this side of eternity.
Oh man, and that happens all the time.
And we have those stories too.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the greatest challenges that every one of us face, is tending the garden of our hearts so that we can remember and take stock of the good things, because it's easy to remember the blows that you've been dealt. It's easy to remember the pains, the wounds that you've taken on, but it's easy to forget or overlook all the little moments of grace that God has given you in the form of another person, for me,
Yeah. But if we endure, we do not grow tired of doing good, we will reap a harvest at the proper time if we don't give up.
Yeah.
And the more and more I'm studying that idea of a harvest, I think it really is twofold. And we're talking about it all month, obviously, fourth soil. So we have to be talking about harvest. Harvest, and at one point, like my Baptist in me totally gets, harvest is more souls to the kingdom, which is, that's the harvest, right? It's, Jesus says, the laborers are few. The harvest is plentiful, so go out and do the work. But also the harvest, it seems, as I study Galatians in that context, I'm studying 2 Timothy, Mark 4 even, the harvest is theosis. It's us becoming like him. So it's also our own character. So something that really was an unlock for me in this church planting journey is, okay, maybe more souls haven't been added to the kingdom yet that I thought would. That hasn't multiplied 100-fold like I assumed. But I never imagined the type of work he did in my heart this past 10 years. Yeah. And it makes you realize, like, oh, these 9 years haven't been wasted. Yeah. Like, I'm so and I have so much more to go. But I think it's okay to sometimes be like, man, I'm way more grateful than I was 9 years ago. I'm way more, I can endure affliction better. Like, when the harvest does come, I think I know, I thank you, Jesus, honestly. Thank you, Jesus, for not giving us 300 people that second week.
Oh, man.
You know what I mean?
How much damage would I have done?
Yeah.
If I had been successful in that way,
yes.
it would have wreaked a lot of damage, because the Lord was still forming, and that's what he's doing in those hardships. He's helping us to embrace the suffering of Christ and to allow him to change us through it.
And he never stops forming. So that's what I theologically really wrestle with. And this is where Dallas Willard has an influence on me. That idea of perfection and like the glorification, which is a doctrine that I believe in. When we die, we will be sinless. We will be, no more tears, no more sorrow. What I love, though, about Dallas Willard's idea of that, he says, like, the Greek idea of perfection is like you've hit peak 100%. You're just great. But the Hebrew understanding of perfection is still this idea of wholeness, where you actually still have room to grow still. So like heaven is not just learning something new about God every day, which is the key, but we're actually in some weird way growing as well, like this blessing. And I can see how like all of a sudden that could be taken wrong and now, but there's something about that there that I keep I'm not confident enough to preach on it, but it is something I'm like thinking through that Willard's been talking about, just this idea, like what a joy it is to never stop learning and to keep growing and all of those things. It's such a wonderful part of the Christian life.
It makes me think about a passage from C.S. Lewis, who's I quote constantly, and it's I think it's from, I don't remember which book it was, but one of the books in the Narnia series where I think it's the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. They make it across and they go up the mountain. Anyways, one of the girls is next to Aslan, who's representing Christ, and she says that he seems like he has gotten larger since the last time she saw him. And his statement, the point that he was making, is that the worst thing in the world would be that we continue to grow and develop and get larger while Christ remains the same. Instead, he's saying that as we grow and develop, it's because Jesus is growing larger in our life as well. And
thanks for capping that off. That's the right way to put it.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It took years for me to figure out that was a really weird statement when I read it as a 7-year-old. So now I understand the genius of what he's talking about and the spiritual truth that Christ would grow larger in our life as we are maturing and becoming more like him.
Yeah, and have the capacity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay, so we can talk about endurance all day, and I imagine that could be a whole series, a whole season of podcast. Let's zero in to this last year. What has God been stirring in your heart? What happened before that led you to reach out in February? As much as you'd like to share, I know some details aren't even worth sharing, all of that, but just kind of zero us in on that.
Yeah, so it's a couple of things. One of them was actually started about 4 years ago in 2020, a growing belief in a calling that the Lord was leading me to. And the whole idea behind it is just recognizing, like, a lot of churches right now are experiencing declining donation. There's less money, and they're having to stretch their dollars farther and farther. And God helped me see a way that we could actually be finding a more faithful level of stewardship by expecting our dollars to produce a return instead of protecting our dollars and trying to keep them from going away from us.
Yeah.
It's a discipleship vision for stewardship as well. And so the God showed me that, and I thought that meant that Living Stone, the church I'd planted, we were going to start businesses that would build us a building that our church could use on the weekends. And I began pursuing that and chasing that. But as I followed the Lord in learning and growing in that, I realized more and more part of the struggle that Living Stone was experiencing was our own limitation, because we were small. And when I say small, I don't mean numbers of people. I even mean like giftings. Like my gifting was looming way too large in our church. And the reason that's dangerous is because that means all of my weaknesses are looming way too large in our church as well. And so it made me think, okay, well, who else is out there? And I've been a friend of yours. I've watched you, and I've loved seeing what God is doing through you And it just made me realize I love every time I sit down and talk with Trey. And so what if we were to actually talk about partnering in ministry? And this was also coming at a time where we were going through, I had another relational issue with a dear friend, and I was feeling tired and I was feeling worn down, and yet persevering and moving forward and enduring these seasons, I knew that the Lord is not done. He's not telling me this is over. So, but it might mean that he's redirecting our course. And so speaking with our elders, I just told them, I think that we should explore joining with another church in order to combine our strengths and supplement each other in our weaknesses. And that led me to calling you. And so I think that we decided that in like November. When was that? November of 2023?
23 then.
Yeah. And so then I like texted you, and it's like I was courting you and you didn't really know it.
I had no idea.
Yeah. I'm smooth like that. And so
I remember there was like a turning point in the meeting, like the reason we're here. I'm got it.
Yeah. No, I remember that moment because, now we move forward to February. So it's like, I've been slowly ingraining my way into your heart.
I kept saying, hey, I'm busy. I'll read. Like, I think you wanted to meet in like December.
Yes.
And I kept blowing you off. So keep going.
Absolutely. That's what we pastors do. We tell you how important it is for you to build relationships, and then we're like, whoa, not with me.
Yeah, that's funny.
No, it's just tough to love as many people as the Lord brings into a church, and that's why we need everybody. But yeah, so we got together, and I remember going into this meeting, I'm like, how do I say we should join our churches? And so about halfway through lunch with you and Caleb, I was finally like, I guess I'm just going to say it. So, hey, I think we ought to merge our churches. And I remember the shock on both of your faces where it was like, okay, wow. I think you said something like, I was not expecting that.
Right.
And, but I just figured let's just be honest and share where I'm at. And, at that time I wanted to know, I know you, but I don't know where your church is.
Right.
And,
I always thought that was healthy about us. We didn't come talk just about what's the metrics? We were just like, how's your soul? How's mine?
Absolutely.
What's God doing in each other's life?
Absolutely. I love that too. And, I think that is so healthy for pastors.
Yeah.
And so, so then, I think that we just, as the year then progressed, we went through another season of hardship at Living Stone. And at first it didn't feel that hard because, like a lot of churches, we just noticed that people's attendance pattern had changed, it had shifted. And people who were once attending, 3 times a month were now attending twice a month. People that were attending twice a month are now slipping to every 6 weeks or so.
Which a lot of the data backs that up.
Absolutely. So I'm studying and trying to figure out, what do you do when this big cultural phenomenon shows up at your front door?
Right.
Because every person, and I'm not, every person has a real reason that they're not there on Sunday. I'm out of town. We've got a volleyball tournament. We're not feeling well this weekend, all of those things. And so it's hard to grab onto those big societal issues, but we were feeling it, that attendance patterns had shifted. So what that results in the church is it just feels like there are fewer people at church on any given Sunday, because there are, but it's not people who are less committed to the church. And that was another weird thing. I would call people to find out, like, hey, haven't seen you in a few weeks. And, they love our church. There's nothing wrong. They're amazed to find out that other people aren't being there. And then they're like, we'll be there Sunday. And we'll see.
I know. I've been shocked sometimes. Like, I'm like, how'd you hear about us? Oh, yeah, so-and-so invited me. I'm like, they haven't been in 5 months. And they're inviting people to our church still? They think, oh, cool, Which,
again, I think it goes back to why the practices are so vital for us to understand that if we're not creating margin, the world is going to continue to pull us further and further from the patterns and the habits that are most helpful to us. And so, we went through that, but then about the middle of summer, we began to realize, oh, wait, there are also some people who are just leaving. And so then we began trying to address that. And that hardship of wrestling through all the feelings that accompanied that led me to the place where I just began asking, okay, so what is the Lord trying to do here?
Yeah.
Because he does his best work. Scripture makes it so clear that the trials and the persecutions we go through, that's the process of the Lord shaping us into who he wants us to be.
Purifying, yeah. Because to be clear, February, you didn't have an outline of how it actually turned out.
Oh, not at all.
You know, so like you were just like, I don't know, are we doing a third thing? Is your thing
Yes.
because so there was still so much.
Are we going to create a super church?
Right.
No idea. And I also thought, 2 years down the road.
Yeah, that's true.
3 years down the road.
Right.
And we'll start this process. But then by fall, I just began trying to transition from why is this hardship happening to me? Which is, I think, where we start a lot of times by, in a way, this sounds way too harsh, but self-pity, wondering why would this happen to me? And, you read in the book of Job, and it took Job a very long time to get to that place where he was in full, pity party mode.
Right.
It doesn't take me as long to get into pity party mode as it took him. And, that's our first reflex. But then it was just recognizing, okay, the Lord loves to use the hardships of this world in order to bring about his purposes. And so we began asking the question, God, what are you wanting to do? Mm-hmm. And in that is when I began to realize, well, I think that he is leading us to join with Passion Creek. And I think...
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was saying, and I think that he's in this way calling me to embrace this vision for helping the church find a more biblical model of stewardship faster than I had anticipated and in a way that I didn't see coming. And yet he had already spoken to me. We had heard him. We had followed him in doing crazy things before. So it wasn't that big of a leap for me to say, okay, I think that the Lord is calling us to bring Living Stone to a close, like the end of a chapter as we continue reading a new part of the story. And so that's when I reached out to you guys and told you I want to lead our church to join with Passion Creek.
And I remember the meeting before that, whenever that was. This was so hard because we had to meet again. I'm like, I don't want to hurt your feelings.
Oh, yeah.
Remember this? But I was like, man, we're doing actually like this is the best year we've ever had.
Yes.
So it'd be irresponsible for me to try to start something new. I actually need to lean into this. And I just remember being nervous. Like, I was like, okay, I'm a shepherd. I need to protect my flock. Like, this is where we're going. The vision's actually starting to work. Like, this is great. But I was dreading that meeting with you, because I was like, I want to do something with you, but it's not this picture that we had just said in February. So I have to be honest about that. But I was always so encouraged just by your humility of like, just the way you received it was so well. And you could tell God was already stirring in your heart that like, yeah, I'm already at a different image in my head too, based off of what we said in February.
And I think, again, that goes back to humility. I think is the most crucial.
It's a superpower
trait of any leader. Like because otherwise I would never have been willing to admit, hey, my church is struggling, and to deal with the fact that some of it is because of me. And a lot of times you want to run from that reality and hide it. But when you just embrace, I have a big part to play in this. It makes it easier to accept the difficulty that you're walking through. Yeah. And then you're able to ask, okay, well then again, it brings you right back to every time that we recognize our own sinfulness and our own brokenness, it brings us right back to, Lord, search my heart, know what's inside of me, reveal to me any evil way that's inside of me so that I can follow you. And I think that the humility that you displayed in attempting to care for me, and the humility that I was attempting to pursue by saying, hey, I know where we are, and that's okay. God has a plan in that too. I don't think he's just God over, sunshine and rainbows. Right. I think he's the God that makes it, rain on both the just and the unjust. And so I got to trust him in these places, even though it's hard. I got to trust him that if I'm in the valley of the shadow of death, he's still the good shepherd that's walking with me the entire way. Amen. So he has a plan. Yes. And so it makes it easier to embrace him as the good shepherd in a dark place when your heart is humble before him. And
God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble.
Man.
Right? Like, just to even see, this past few years, it's interesting. One book I read somewhere back here about spiritual growth is that it's a process of orientation, disorientation, reorientation. And I find it fascinating just with our timelines. I think we're both in a similar timeline of disorientation. So like we had a vision, or other languages, birth of a vision, death of a vision, resurrection of a vision. And I remember in 2021 being so disoriented. Like, God, I was so confident that I was on this path. And now I don't know what I'm even good at. I don't know if I should keep trying to pastor this church. But the problem is, I don't know what else I was so lost. And I remember, actually, this happened this last week. I was walking on the same path where I had that same prayer 3 years ago, saying, God, what are you doing? And I was able to do this last week, go, oh, now I'm in the reorientation phase. I needed that breaking for so many reasons. One among them is to like be gracious to you in these conversations. I don't know if I would have received it well, 3 years ago, and vice versa. It's so interesting how God, he knows what he's doing, but there's so much he has to do to get us there, to break up the soil, to use that fourth soil language.
Yeah. And that's what he did that many times over in our journey. And I am just grateful that I had people around me to shepherd my heart and to get me out of the place that it's easy to get stuck in, where you're just in constant mourning over the death of whatever vision you were holding on to. And it's what prevented me staying in a place of mourning, as opposed to embracing and looking for the resurrection that God wanted to bring out of it. And so I think for me, similarly, that happened in 2021 was where the most critical breaking happened. And I think that it's given me a place where I'm able to hold all the things that the Lord has given me with an open hand. And I'm grateful more than anything else. Even in the midst of suffering, I'm able to look around and say, but Lord, thank you for all that you've given me right now, right here. And
trusting in the God of abundance.
Yeah, he's the one that is doing this for a reason. And it's easy to lose sight of the fact that he is worthy of trust. Yeah. Even when you're in a hard season. And yet I look at what I've experienced over the last month as we've done this hard work of closing the doors of the church that we planted and that we shepherded and that we loved and gave everything to, in order to embrace the Lord directing us here to Passion Creek. And I honestly, again, I think the biggest thing that I can say I feel is just gratitude. I love the way that the Lord has brought all kinds of new relationships into our life. I love learning about what he's doing in this place, and the opportunity to reflect on all the good that he did for years at Living Stone has been just an incredible joy and a blessing. And I think personally for Allie and I, but also for my kids. That's going all the way back to the Lord's first calling for me was to shepherd my family. And I see the way that my kids have watched us suffer and hopefully suffer well before the Lord is equipping them with the kind of experience and education and spiritual growth that just can't happen in seasons of plenty. It only happens in the seasons where you feel the breaking, you feel the loss. And they've gotten to experience that. They've gotten to see our love for Living Stone, but now they're seeing mine and Allie's love for Passion Creek. And I'm hoping that it's gonna deepen what we've always told them, that we don't just love our church, we love the church. And all the ways, all the expressions of the body of Christ. And so I think that what it's done in our kids' lives has been incredible. And I'm grateful for what the Lord is doing.
Have you ever heard of the phrase Dayenu, the Hebrew phrase?
Yes.
So Dayenu means it would have been enough. So they do it during the Passover.
I think you made me listen to one of your sermons and it was in there.
I think so. I am
Sorry, I just
making
had to
him
throw
go
that
through
in.
all of the so the
It's
assimilation
good.
process.
It's culture. It's learning the culture of Passion Creek. Sorry, I shouldn't have
I'm
done
making
that.
him learn all the practice series.
Yeah, I'm going
so
through the practices.
That's
so
amazing.
Yes, that's it.
So yeah, that makes sense with Dayenu and Sabbath. So with Dayenu, it would have been enough. That's like been a phrase for my life that I've been trying to like imprint into my heart, like that spirit of gratitude. You know, like I think the two ways that we fall into sin, and I love how you notice that in your own life, is either self-pity or self-praise. And either way, you know, like I'm learning more and more, you can't sin and be grateful at the same time. You know, like if
That's
you
a really great statement.
really
Yeah.
have a spirit of gratitude, it does keep you within the will of God, you know, and just knowing that every good gift is from above. At the same time, what I love about this new season, what I've learned, so when you approached us in February, we were also going through this new faith challenge where we were going to go to 2 services. So I remember being so scared. John Wimber he says faith is spelled R-I-S-K.
Yeah.
And it just felt like such a risk. But we did it, and it's amazing to see what happened. And then November, whatever the timeline is, it's really around November where we were like, okay, we're doing this. I was like, this is a whole new RISK. Like this is a faith step. But what I love to do, and I know we can't do it every single week of our lives, but it's such a fun space to be in where the decisions you make, which you think are according to the Lord's will, it will either leave you dazzled or disappointed and nothing in between. You know, and so like even just this risk of saying, okay, like it's still the same, it's our mission and vision at Passion Creek, yada yada, but we're going to take that risk to take more than a handful of folks and see what can we do to help integrate them into the life of our church, but also in humility say like, hey, what has God been teaching you guys, and how does that help form our vision, you know, and vice versa. And you know, and I've heard so many and I think it's because of a million reasons. I think pride's one of them. People have horror stories of churches trying to do something together. And I was like, but I know Whitney, you know, like, I feel like our language has been different than how some people have decided to talk about it and all those sorts of things. And I also know it's still January. So
I have a lot of time to screw this up for us.
Same. But what a joy it's been. You know, just that spirit of unity, I believe, is in the room, kingdom mentality. And so it's just exciting. And I think, you know, people have said like, oh, this could go wrong. And I'm like, isn't that fun? You know, like dazzled or disappointed, baby.
Amen.
We got one life.
You were talking on last Sunday about Martin Luther at one point, and it brought to mind one of my favorite moments where he was talking with the magistrates at the time about the way that they were teaching grace and the way that Martin Luther was, and they said to him, if you teach grace in this way, people will do whatever they want. And Martin Luther's response was, exactly. Because if you don't have the risk of people screwing things up, you're not going to get the reward of watching God work through people in ways we never even imagined. And so I love the teetering on the edge of giving people freedom that could screw all of this up, because that's where you're going to see God work in amazing ways. And so I love risk. So
and there's dumb risk, but there's
I'm
also
good at those too. I'm good at that.
But yeah, what a joy to be in that. And I think it's that whole one of my favorite breath prayers is, Lord, I don't understand you, but I trust you. And I think that's what's been so fun in this conversation. And it's starting to, like, to me, it's like light bulb moments of understanding, and I get it. But I also feel like, just as an encouragement, whatever season our listeners are in, it's often your first step needs to be, I'm taking that step forward, not because I understand what you're doing, but I trust you. So I trust whatever you're doing. And the Lord loves to work through that type of soil.
Absolutely. I mean, he defines himself in Scripture as a father for a reason. I don't know many fathers who find joy in being demanding and being harsh. And I know a lot of fathers who find incredible, unspeakable, indescribable joy in their children responding out of love and respect and admiration. And God is the exact same way. He's not demanding and controlling. He just wants us to trust him, even when he says things and leads us into places that seem scary, to trust him that he is a good father and he's doing it for a reason.
Yeah. So to help wrap it up, because Man, me and you could talk forever, and we do talk forever. It's
I
not always on
talk
recording.
forever without you. So, yeah.
I have a meeting in 25 minutes at BlackRock, so
Yeah.
I'm trying to time that out. How would you describe what your calling is now? I feel like, what is God calling you to do in this season? How does that align with what we're doing at Passion Creek? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, so this is really important. I'm 40 years old. I went through my midlife crisis, and it was amazing.
Nice.
It was good. It can be good because all it's doing is you're asking your own heart, okay, what are the things what are all the hopes and dreams that I need to let go of?
Yeah.
And that's what's hard. That's what's disorienting. That's where people get lost sometimes. But the other side of it is when you let go of those things, it's so you can say, Lord, what do I need to grab tightly to? And so
more focused and fruitful, right?
absolutely. And so the big thing, so the next 40 years of my life is going to be spent founding a multi-generational family vision that my children can hold on to and stretches to the third generation. And so that sounds really big and weird, and there's a lot that goes into that, but a piece of that foundational vision is to love the Lord and serve him in his church. And so us at Passion Creek, the Lord is using that calling to drive my heart to the place where he built me for evangelism and for outreach. And I get to love God through the church at Passion Creek by inviting other people into the passion that the Lord has given me. And so this year is going to be about now joining with the people of Passion Creek and helping them to follow the Lord's invitation to reach out to their neighbors, to be like Christ, and to go to where God's children are, even if we don't see them as his children yet.
Right.
And that's my passion. And so I envision this year is going to be a lot about helping people, giving people tools that will help them feel more comfortable and do the work of evangelism. But at the same time, helping them learn rhythms where it becomes not just a thing that they do when it's scheduled by Trey and Caleb, but instead it's reaching out to their neighbor with the good news of Christ is something that they do every single day. And that is because, yes, I want the people of Passion Creek to grow in that. But at the same time, this is me being a guy that's a husband and a father and doing my best to show them this is what it means to be a disciple. It's to go out and to fulfill the Great Commission, even though that makes it seem too intimidating. I don't like, it's easier than it sounds when Jesus is standing on a hill about to ascend into heaven. It looks a lot more like loving your neighbor in the way that Christ loved you, which means that he initiated, he offered forgiveness, he bridged the gap. And so those are the things that I want to do at Passion Creek, and I feel the Lord leading me to.
And I love how he's in one sense narrowing your vision, but he's also expanding it.
Yes.
So like in your mind's eye, it was like, let's create that type of life on life relational discipleship in your language in Eastmark. And that's our heartbeat. But we're like, cool. What does that look like in Eastmark and Santan Valley and Queen Creek and Gilbert and Chandler? Because that just seems to be who the Lord's been giving us. And it's like, let's have these little clusters of people and let's influence your neighborhood for the glory of God.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that vision. I love that the Lord is bringing those people here because it really is. It makes every single Sunday an Acts 2 moment where all of a sudden the Spirit can move on the hearts of his people, and then they're going to go back to the places where they came from.
Right.
And all of a sudden now those tongues of fire are, little flames that are going to begin spreading. That's probably not a great analogy right now with all that's going on. So spiritual fire.
Well, I even love in 2022, Pastor Caleb and I were like, hey, in 2025, that's our outreach year. That's Formed by Jesus together. Formed by Jesus, a lot of, which is always, but like very much emphasis 2023. Together, all the practices were together practices in 2024. And the 4 others are all in our definition of these 3 practices, fasting, prayer, and witness literally doesn't make sense if it's not outward oriented.
Absolutely.
And so just like God's favor, even in 2022, and we have no idea why, we were like, we feel like those three need to be in the back end, and that needs to be a 2025 thing. Yeah. And just how he's orchestrating that. And so I'm excited to use your skill sets and passions and giftings to help with our people who have like-mindedness and helping do that. Like one thing that people forget is you fast for the sake of others.
Yes.
You fast for the souls of your neighbor. And we're so excited to lean into that.
Yeah, that's going to be awesome. I love it too. My kids are all talking about how, fasting, and a couple of them with deep trepidation. A couple of them view it as a challenge, so yes. It's going to, no matter what, it's like bringing our family into these spiritual disciplines. It really does. These disciplines, they prepare our heart. It's tilling the soil of our soul so that the Lord can bring out the fruit that he wants in our lives.
And we're so impressed. Julie actually put together a family guide to help. Because I think adults mainly for a Sunday morning context. And so she just put together, like, in good kid language, hey parents, walk through fasting with your kids in this way. It's phenomenal.
That's awesome.
So we're super excited. This is the first time we're doing that. So this is the first time we'll have a family guide along with just our Formed by Fasting guide, which is right there. So thank you. Again, we can go on forever. And I'd love to even have another conversation, just a little bit more about your vision. I know part of it is you calling it a steward shift, correct?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And to steward the buildings that churches have for the glory of God, but also to be stewards of that resource.
As much as we talk all the time and spend millions of dollars helping people become free financially, which you should engage in all of that.
Yeah.
Don't fall for the lie that the Lord wants you to be ambivalent about money. He wants you to be a good steward of the money that he's given you. I want churches to be free.
Yeah.
I think it's crazy that we are in the most industrious nation in the history of the world, and there are churches that can't do the things they feel God calling them to do because they're out of money. We need to break that.
Yeah.
It's, that's one of my big visions, and my heartbeat for the future is helping to free the church financially so that we can follow the Lord wherever he calls us.
Yeah. Well, Whitney, I want to honor you. I'm grateful for you and your family. Yeah. I believe that you are not only a person who hears the word, but you do it. I've seen that reflected in your life these past 10 years. I'm grateful for your humility. You've always been the first to admit life's not going great. I think there's been times where I was insecure when we get together. My life's in shambles, but I'm gonna act like everything's okay because I'm with another pastor and his life is great. And then you're like, look, I had the worst week ever. Oh, okay, good. I can talk that way too. So I'm thankful for that. I love your emphasis on family. It's really actually challenging to me as I think through who I am as a father. So I'm grateful for the way that you think to the third and fourth generation, which the fact that that's not regular vernacular for me shows I'm more influenced by the culture than I am by the scriptures, because the third and fourth generation is so saturated in the scriptures. We're supposed to think well beyond us. Even how we think about our church buildings.
Yes.
We're building this not for just this generation, but for the ones we don't even know. So I'm grateful for that. I'm so grateful, again, for just the way you have humbled yourself. And you've supported my family. So you've been saying, like, I want to be a support to you. Like, you've literally done that every week so far, like sending me an encouraging text. So I see that. I feel that. My wife feels loved by Allie. Our kids love each other, and I'm excited just for our church to continue to just gel and work together. Yeah. So we are beyond thrilled. I feel like we're kind of like the Cleveland Cavaliers that got the number 1 pick and just got LeBron James. So very grateful.
LeBron in his early 40s. We'll say that.
So yeah, it's just a grace and what a joy, and we're just holding our future with open hands. Right? Yeah, this absolutely. Is the Lord, and we will continue to follow Him as following His word as a lamp unto our feet and light unto our path. And those lamps can only go so far, but we know what these next few steps are, and we're super excited about what those look like. So grace and peace to you, brother.
Yeah, thank you, man.
And thank you guys for watching. Comment below your favorite takeaway. See you on the next one.